Okay, baby is sleeping. Tim is in the basement working out, so I thought I would film a quick little spiel rundown of our labor and delivery and birth story. Hopefully it'll be like 5 or 10 minutes. Try not to talk too much. If this is at all triggering for you, please don't watch this video. If you don't like anatomy, physiology, body parts, things, this probably isn't for you. I'll be pretty open. And then what else? Oh, overall, I would say I had a neutral to positive birth experience. I think anytime that baby and mom are healthy and well, you have to count it as a positive experience. It just didn't go at all like I expected or hoped it would. But that's why you have to go in with an open mind, and you can prepare, but you really can't prepare because it's a crazy process. Okay, so 39-week appointment. Baby was actually growing smaller. Take that with a grain of salt. I know that measurements aren't always accurate, but I felt like I was getting smaller. Placenta and amniotic cord, like everything has a shelf life, and my doctor felt like it would be better to get baby out because she didn't feel like he or she was getting enough nourishment and nutrients at that point. So I was induced a day before my due date. We went in on a Tuesday night at 10 p.m., which was really weird. And I got 3 rounds of Cytotec overnight, which is a medication to hopefully, I think that was to soften the cervix. I can't remember exactly. Everything's a blur now. We're a month out also, so some of the details are a little bit lost. I was hooked up to an IV and a monitor on my belly. So, and the bed was super uncomfy. Didn't sleep very much at all that night. And they come in and check you. Tim was there. He slept on the little pull-out couch thing. And then the next morning, I went on a couple walks before they started Pitocin, which they started at 10:30. And overall was doing pretty good with that. I had a really, really finicky IV. Like, said occluded no matter what I did, even though it wasn't included. So I couldn't move around as much as I wanted, and I had the monitor on my belly that was measuring my contractions and the fetal heart rate. But I did bring a yoga mat. I did do some cat-cow, did some stretching, some breath work, and was tolerating the mild contractions really well. Every hour they would bump it up, bump it up, bump it up. And so at some point that morning too, the doctor came in and swept my membranes in hopes to induce labor. So I'm like not really dilating very much. I'm 60% effaced. I think I was 1 centimeter dilated at that point. Okay, anyways, woo, gone. So 4 hours passed, and at the same time that they bumped me up to the maximum amount of Pitocin, my water also broke, like within a couple minutes, because the doctor was actually gonna come in. She's like, okay, I'm gonna break your water. And I was like, okay. A couple minutes ago, I felt and heard this weird pop in my belly. I'm not really sure what that was. She's like, oh, I don't know. And then she's like, oh, your water broke. So that got really intense. I had really, really, really intense contractions every single minute. And it was not sustainable. At that point, I was 4 centimeters dilated. I think if I was like 8 or 9 centimeters, for sure, I would have pushed through because I would have been so close. But I knew that it was causing like a lot of panic and anxiety in me. I couldn't get comfortable whatsoever. I was like digging into Tim's shoulder, and he was like, yeah, I wanted to tell you that it really hurt, but then I thought maybe that's not the time and place. I said, correct. I was like writhing in pain, I'm not gonna lie. And there was no rest. They were back to back to back. And I know that labor gets more intense when your water breaks, and Pitocin contractions are kind of just a different animal. So I decided it was going to be a better experience. Even though I didn't plan on getting an epidural, I just knew that that was the choice. That was the right choice. So thankfully the anesthesiologist was super fast, and he was probably around 60, so you could tell he was very experienced, did a great job. I I was toying around with the idea of getting the epidural for maybe 10 minutes with Tim, texted my mom briefly, or he did, I didn't have my phone, because that was not necessarily my birth plan, but I decided after about 10 minutes, and then he came in maybe 20 minutes after that, so I really only had to wait like 20 to 30 minutes, and it took effect immediately. And from that point on, I kind of just rested. I really thought I was gonna like listen to my birthing playlist and, you know, like I said, do a lot of movement, but we watched some Practical Jokers and some basketball, and I just chilled out for a little bit because I needed to. That was really intense. The good thing was with the epidural, I could move my legs, which I know is not always the case. They said they had a medication shortage, so they had to switch whatever medication was in the epidural, and turns out a handful of other women have been able to move their legs too. I said, this is great. And I could still feel the contractions mildly. As we got closer to actual delivery, I could feel them moderately, which I wasn't upset about. I think it was helpful. Okay, so chilling out with the epidural from 3 until 6-ish, 5 or 6. Doctor keeps checking in, nurse keeps checking in. I'm still 4 to 5 centimeters dilated, and they think baby is either kind of transverse, like sideways, or oblique, and they're really supposed to be head down and facing backwards. So at that point, I was a little concerned that I might have to get a C-section, which again, if it would have happened, would have been fine, but just not expected. And by the way, after I got the epidural, I had to cry for 5 minutes just to kind of like say, oh man, that didn't turn out how I wanted. But then after that, I was like, okay, here we go. New plan, let's do it. So things were not really progressing because I wasn't dilating anymore because baby's head was not putting pressure down on my cervix. So I asked if I could, they had me turn on my side a little bit. That didn't help. Since I had control of my legs, I asked if I could flip around, and I did. So I elevated the head of the bed a little bit, and then I got onto my hands and knees, like cat-cow, tabletop, my true love. And that helped so much. I also did like a little internal rotation of my hips, or I've played around with the rotation to try to get baby to move down. And it helped so much. So I was kind of doing some swaying, some cat-cow, some leans, and within an hour, I dilated from 5 centimeters to 9.75. So baby got locked and loaded, fully dilated, great. There was like one little tiny portion that wasn't quite dilated, but that happened quickly. And then they said, when you feel like you need to have a bowel movement, it's time to start pushing. And that happened. I didn't have bowel movement actually, but that I know of. I don't think I did. Actually, I asked and I didn't, but I'm getting lost, distracted. Okay. Flipped around, dilated, started pushing, did a couple practice pushes, and the nurse was like, oh, okay, I need to call the doctor, because it was happening really quickly. I pushed for about 20 to 25 minutes and baby was here. So I know ideally I would have really liked to kind of like take my time and exhale with the push out. All these things I learned. They at the hospital taught us to hold your breath, push really, really hard for 10 seconds 3 times, and then rest for a minute or so, and then do it again. I know that is not necessarily the best way to do it, but at that point, I was pretty eager to meet my baby and just kind of be done with the whole thing. So I did a combination. They really told me to like Valsalva and hold my breath and push, but I secretly was kind of like exhaling the air out at the same time, or I took turns with both. They had me flip onto my back and put my legs in the stirrups. Again, I would have maybe liked to try on my hands and knees or in more of a squatting position, but with the epidural, that would have been a little harder. Could have maybe done hands and knees, but I kind of just, at that point, again, went with what they recommended and was kind of ready to meet baby and just have baby be healthy. Okay, so it took 20 minutes to push. I could feel some things, but it was definitely dulled because of the epidural. head came out, and then I did one more push and the baby was out, and Tim got to announce the sex of the baby, which was super cute. The nurses and doctors were joking that one of the other dads got it wrong, and they were all so excited because most people find out the gender of their baby, but we decided to wait. So they were so excited. They were like, you better not get it wrong. You have one job. So he was like, maybe I'll put in a video. Maybe I will. He was like so intensely peering in to make sure he didn't get it wrong.
There you go. Good job. All right. Head out.
Yeah.
Push again for me.
Oh my God. It's a boy! No, that's a Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Good job, honey. Wow. Oh my God.
And he said, it's a boy. So we had a little boy. My mom was also in the room. She came in after I got the epidural. So she was in there the last few hours. They immediately put baby on my skin for a full hour. So they're doing a little bit of the checkups, but they're not even doing the weigh-ins. I think they maybe like wiped him down a little. Actually, no, they didn't wipe him down. And he screamed and cried right away. So lungs were healthy. I ended up tearing quite a bit. So they had to stitch me up for that full hour that I was holding baby boy. And thankfully I had the epidural, but I could still feel it, and it was uncomfortable, and I bled quite a bit as well. Turns out I had a grade 2 perennial tear, a labial tear, and high vaginal wall tears on both sides, so like on the inside. And I think those are the ones. I've had a bit of a rougher postpartum recovery because of that. Those are tough. I don't know a ton about them. There's not a lot of information online. I don't think they're super common. And I think it's just, it happens, but also because if you're gonna tell me to push, like I'm gonna push. So I think probably I didn't give myself enough time to let everything expand fully and make room. So, but baby came out healthy, which was the important thing. After the hour of stitching and skin to skin, then they took baby. It's a boy. We named him River James Tate, and he was 5 pounds 15 ounces. So just a little thing. He was 18 inches long, and his head was like 47 percentile. And my mom got Chick-fil-A ordered because I really wanted like a frozen slushie. So I got a frozen lemonade and a chicken sandwich, and it was really good. So I was eating and drinking. After a little while, they asked me, like we were gonna transfer rooms. This is so much longer than I thought it was gonna be. It's okay. And they use like this is called a Serosteti. It's a lift that we use as PTs in the hospital all the time. If someone is weak or has an epidural, doesn't have control of their body very well. So they used that to get me to the bathroom. Got super, super dizzy. I was like not feeling hot at all. I said, I'm pretty sure I'm about to pass out. And they're like, oh yeah, it happens all the time with the epidural. I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try for a little bit. And then I'm on the toilet, I was like, I really don't feel well. So they got me to a transport chair, took me, like wheeled me through the hospital to another room. The whole time I'm on the verge of passing out for sure. Got me into the new room. I'm still not in bed. Tim's like, hey, she's pretty dizzy. Should we get her laying down? And they're like, this happens all the time. And they're like signing into the computer, and then I pass out. And Tim had to like kind of catch me. I was sitting, but leaned back, and he caught me. And then they finally got me in bed because your blood pressure can obviously, well, this isn't, if you're in the medical field, but your blood pressure when you sit up actually drops. So the best thing to do is to lay back down, and that didn't happen in time. And my blood pressure was 80/40 after I recovered. So I don't know, and after I was laying down again, I don't know how low it was. Also turns out I bled 400 milliliters of blood. The hemorrhage threshold is 500, so I lost quite a bit of blood. So yeah, got some fluids in, drank some water, felt a lot better, and then our hospital journey started. River was small. He was small for gestational age, so they had to do blood sugar checks every couple hours. And his bilirubin it was just below the threshold, but they took it the next morning and it was, I think I have my days mixed up, but I don't know, it doesn't matter. His rate of increase was high, so they were concerned about that. We ended up having to stay in the hospital for 4 days, which was a big bummer. Tim would go home for a couple hours in the afternoon. My mom would come in. She slept at my house. Tim slept in the hospital overnight. And those first few nights are tough. You're just like, the nurses are checking on you every hour or two. Baby's not sleeping. Baby needs to get checked on. My body feels like pretty wrecked. Ice packs are a lifesaver. And what else? I tried to go for a couple walks in the hallway, but was very, very sore. Okay, fast forward like a day or two. I was thankfully getting colostrum, and so River was getting a little bit of nutrition that way, but my milk hadn't come in yet, and he was so small. They really emphasize breastfeeding, which is such a beautiful, great thing, but at that point I was like, my baby is really small, like, can we just get him some nutrients? So finally they let me start pumping, and we got some donor breast milk, which was great. He loved it and he chugged it, and he was like, wow, yeah, he was really, really hungry. He needs to grow. So he had lost 7 or 8% of his body weight, and the nurse that night was like, I'm not gonna lie, you're probably gonna have to stay another day or two. They're gonna have to do a 2-hour car seat test since he's so small. If they lose more than 10% of their body weight, they have to do a car seat test. I'm like, I live 30 minutes away, not 2 hours. Anyways, then the pediatrician was like, yep, we're gonna do more follow-up bilirubin testing and another weight check-in. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, can I, like, we can keep feeding him though, right? And she was like, no, that's cheating. I was like, what? So we fed him anyways. The nurse wasn't in there during that. So we said, hey, can we get more donor breast milk? And she said, yeah. And she didn't know that the pediatrician told us not to. By the way, my mom is a pediatrician, and so she was there the whole time as well, and I appreciated her input. I'm not normally like, well, I'm a little rebellious, but we kind of ended up having to be those patients and those people that really had to advocate for ourselves. Our care the last day was really bad. And I called my insurance company and was like, if I leave AMA, which is against medical advice, will this still be covered? And they said yes. So we were very, very much considering leaving AMA because we had an appointment scheduled the next morning at 8 a.m. to check his bilirubin. It wasn't high enough to send him to the NICU and start treatment with the lights, but it was high enough to have them keep him longer. And we're like, okay, we're just gonna be in this awkward limbo for a couple more days. Thankfully, we pumped him with some milk and he passed his weight test. And thankfully, a new pediatrician came on board at 7 p.m. and she called and was like, yes, his rate of increase is still higher than we would like it to be. I'm gonna give you the option. I said, can we please go home? We have an appointment the next morning. She was a lot more understanding. And she said, we're gonna order a Billy blanket. So we ended up discharging on Friday night at 8 or 8:30 p.m. and ordered a bilirubin blanket, and it got delivered to our house at 10 p.m. So we got River on that all night for like 9 hours before the appointment next morning. And that was a lifesaver, super convenient. I think it's like $95 a day, but insurance should cover it. Even if it's not, it was worth $100 for us to go freaking home. And then you just return it the next day. So the appointment the next morning was good. He ended up being fine with his bilirubin. So that one day of treatment was enough. And he's pooping, peeing, eating a ton. All that turnover helped as well. So yeah, that last day was definitely not fun. And the night nurse ended up having to discharge us. And he's like, I haven't done this in 6 months. We're really not supposed to do this. But we were super grateful and ready to be home for sure. And that's my story. So I think that's all I'm going to share for now. In summation, got induced, doing well until the max Pitocin and water broke. Got an epidural. Epidural was great. Could move around. Baby was kind of stuck, wasn't dilating. Flipped on hands and knees. Went great from there. Only pushed for 20 minutes, but tore and bled a lot. Baby was small and had borderline bilirubin. Had to stay in the hospital longer. Went home. Okay. I probably forgot a couple things, but that's it. We are home. We've been home for about a month now, and he's doing great and he's growing, and that'll be the next video. I'll just share him and how we've been doing. All right. Thanks for listening if you're at all interested in that.